We'll do that. There we go. Sound and everything? Perfect. Well, folks, I appreciate you sticking out. I know end of the day, everybody's brains are exploding. The talk I wanted to share today is whatever you want to call it, red team, blue team, purple team. I'm coming up on 20 years working in InfoSec. I've held a lot of different jobs in that time, which is weird because I didn't even start out. I'm one of those exceptions that are more and more the norm. I went to school to be a music teacher. Over time, I worked as a security analyst, security manager, did third-party risk management, a lot of consulting, which is where I got my pen testing chops. And what I wanted to share today is that red team, blue team combo. So folks in the room, your day-to-day, how many of you are more on the attack and pen side? Your job is to break things. And then everybody else, are we all blue team, defenders, builders, put the controls in place? Got it. That helps give me a picture. Having lived both lives, I know how frustrating it is to try to keep up with the controls you're trying to manage when you've got too few people, zero training budget. You have to defend against all the things when the bad guys only have to be right once. And as a pen tester, I know what it's like when you walk into a shop and you feel terrible because you're taking advantage of people who haven't had the opportunity to shore up their controls yet. But the teacher in me has always used that as a teaching moment, and that's the info I wanted to share out today to help us get the picture of both sides of the coin. When it comes to attacking an organization for a pen test, I'm a huge fan of the PTES. When I was consulting, we lived and died by the pen test execution standard. And I always describe it as a funnel. If you look at the very first couple of steps, pre-engagement interactions, and then intelligence gathering, that's where the bulk of our time went. If somebody wanted me to pen test for a week, I was going to spend 2 to 3 days just doing information gathering. Because the more you learn about an organization, the more likely you are to find something that can be exploited, to find something that can be popped. And within the context of today's talk, what I have seen more frequently as of late, pen testers actually working in the field, guys who are a lot better at it than I am. I've got one guy who I can't tell you who he is. He's a friend and he does some subcontracting work, and he's really freaking good. I've seen him go from unauthorized outsider to domain admin by lunchtime on the first day of the engagement. He doesn't run scans. He doesn't look for technical vulnerabilities that he can use a Metasploit module to try to pop the box and get in. He skips all of that. He goes straight for credentials, because if he can get one valid set of end user credentials, that's the first domino. That's how he starts knocking things down one after the other to get to that privileged account. As defenders, so the blue team folks in the room, if you wanted to start the weekend off wrong, go search for how many of your users are oversharing information about themselves that an attacker might use to get into your organization. I'll talk about some of the details in a bit, but if you were to do open source intelligence gathering on your own organizations, on your own employees, you're going to have the visibility, you're going to have the same amount of information an actual attacker will have at their disposal. And that blend, like the Ashley Madison hack, I don't want to know if you were impacted, judgment-free zone. But with Ashley Madison, one of the most surprising insights coming out of that dump of credentials to me was the number of corporate email addresses that people were using to register with this site, this service. And I say that's surprising to me because nothing says discretion like first name dot last name at company.com. But with a lot of our end users, they don't necessarily see the difference between personal email and professional email. And some end users don't bother using personal email at all. Everything coming from a guy who's worked forensics and can never unsee certain things I've seen. Some people use their corporate email for absolutely everything. And because of that publicly available information and just the nature of how the internet works, In order for one computer to talk to another computer, they have to share host name and IP information and port availability and service availability. And in order for us as end users, or I should say like corporate users, system administrators, we have to register with sites and services to say, yes, this domain block belongs to us. There's a lot of publicly available information that's easily accessible in that space. And now that we're turning to software as a service more and more frequently, or another way to put it, websites that we log into to do our jobs, we've got all these usernames and passwords that we don't have visibility into or sometimes control over at all. If you even know what all of the software as a service apps are that your organization is using. So this is all necessary, but from a pen testing standpoint, it becomes a gold mine of information, which only increases our attack surface. And again, when an attacker gets into the organization, and it was one of the points from the crypto talk, if anybody was in there, if a crypto miner, like CoinHive, right? Somebody gets the JavaScript, they run it in your browser, and they take 100% of your CPU usage, you're going to know right away. But if they take 5% of your CPU usage, you might be mining for years and never know that you've been taken advantage of in that nature. And when it comes to identity-based attacks, that's what the smarter attackers are doing. If I can go into an organization and just look around on their internal network shares with a regular user account, that's not weird, uncommon activity for a user to go to a network share, especially if the network share is company all. So the smarter attackers are going to sit around, poke around, and see what they can find over time without tripping any bells and whistles. That pen tester friend I told you about, this is his talk, or this is his process. This also got him a bottle of Angel's Envy because I've done a lot of talks on pen testing in general and this flow. And he goes, when I get down to 6, 7, 8, it's a little muddy. But for his process, the very first thing he does, open source intelligence. I want to find usernames. I want to find people who work in an organization. I want to learn about the people. The very thing he does next is go after credentials. And I'll talk about some of this in more detail. But the point that I want you to take away is it is a defined, repeatable process that is successful in the majority of pen tests that we work on. And from a defender standpoint, from a blue team standpoint, that's terrifying. Because if I've got somebody who is script kiddie, tossing stuff over the wall and hoping it works, I'm more likely to be able to defend. If I've got a well-implemented and maintained security program that can identify, prevent, detect, respond, I can keep the bad actors out, or I can at least see when they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, then I have an opportunity to respond and shut them down quickly. But when the adversary has a repeatable process that they can execute again and again and again with high levels of success, if that process is abused, if the process is refined, it makes the blue team's job much, much harder. And what's even more concerning is that none of the techniques that we would use in these pen tests are new. Password spraying, how many people have played around with password spraying attacks? If you have not, give it a go. It's eye-opening. Password spraying, going back to some of the stuff I'll be talking about in a bit with identifying sysadmins on the network and dumping creds from memory. It's all out there on GitHub, and there are more and more tools being added every day. And with the advent of bug bounty programs like HackerOne and BugCrowd, there's now financial incentive for people to get more involved in security research. And I think there's a complement between these two activities. People doing more research in the public space and people releasing and publishing tools in the public space. It's making the blue team's job harder because the adversaries now have access to more resources with README files. And apologies for anybody, I live online. My kids and I talk in memes. It drives my wife nuts when she doesn't see the reference. There's going to be a lot of this today, so hope you like it. If not, too bad, it's there anyway. But I want to talk to you today about that knowing your enemy, knowing yourself, and giving you a little perspective that hopefully you can take back to help you do what you're trying to do. First thing I think I need to go through is just an IAM primer. I worked for 4 years at Abercrombie & Fitch as a model. No, that was 2 years. I hate that gets as many laughs as it does. You guys don't see it? No, they hired me in to build out their PCI compliance program. At the time, they had $4 billion in annual revenue, and I was their very first security hire. In my time there, 2008, the economy took a nasty turn, and we were in the middle of rolling out an identity and access management technology that integrated all of our systems. So the architect on that project was given the news that he had to cut all of his contractors loose by the end of the week. Like, it was that quick that they made the decision. He was coming over to my team, and he and I were now the identity and access management administrators for a tool that would, over the course of each year, go through about 250,000 user credentials. So you take the store employees and a lot of turnover, especially in retail. I learned a lot in that time. It was very painful. I used to have hair. But the takeaways I want to give you are just a few acronyms that you're going to want to be aware of, especially as it comes into how people do IAM operations. I'm not going to sit here and read through all these. That's boring. I will let you know I've got the slides up on Speaker Deck and SlideShare. I put them up this morning. So if you want all this information to read through when you're actually ready to sit down and go over it, it's all there. Pull it down, give it a once over. But there are a lot of acronyms about what we do, identity, access, role-based access controls. This is all perfect world stuff. If an organization is going down the path of implementing an identity and access management program, they may or may not even know what these concepts mean. But more importantly, some of them will understand what the concepts mean, but to take it from concept to implementation is not an easy task. It's one thing to say that every new account we create is going to only have access to the things that the person needs access for their job, right? Principle of least privilege. How do you do that? How do you create an account that might exist in 50 disparate systems and ensure that when HR says this person starts on Monday, that account is created with the right permissions? And the answer is not, I'm going to take somebody else on that person's team, copy paste, and then we have a new account. So the concepts are there. These are for yours for your review at another time. But a couple of other terms I wanted to talk about. In the identity space, so much of what becomes IAM operations is provisioning and deprovisioning. Somebody needs an account. Somebody needs access to a server. Somebody needs added to a group. I'm going to give them this entitlement. And that entitlement might be hardware, it might be licenses, but an entitlement is something that the user has. And then even within the directory, there are attributes associated with the user that determine what those entitlements are. Like if I get added to an Oracle database and I have a particular role, I might have an attribute in the directory, the LDAP directory, that says Jerod is allowed to do this in the Oracle database. If you understand, let me jump back real quick, how to connect to and read an LDAP directory, that puts you in an advantageous space as an attacker. If you can get a domain user's credentials and then just authenticate to the domain controller. When I say authenticate, connect to the LDAP service over 389.636, and then look through the directory and say, oh, this is the user object, and these are the entitlements that have been granted there. There's so much information, and the way directories are structured, if you have a traditional user account, a non-privileged user account, all you have to do is find the domain controller, connect, and you have access to all that data. all that information. The insight or the perspective I hope that pen testers, red teamers, will take away today is this flow. And this is actually from a Kuppringer-Cole paper that I've got linked to at the end of the presentation. When somebody comes into an organization, when their relationship with the organization begins, that initial step of giving them the things they need is called provisioning. Now, I did not use the word employee there for a very specific purpose. Not everybody associated with an organization is an employee. How many folks work in a hospital? You have employees, you have contractors, you have, you have your part-time and your full-time employees, which are going to be handled differently. You have doctors, which are their own animal. You'll have volunteers. Anybody work in the university space? Right? So alumni. What do you do with an alumni account after somebody is no longer a student at the university, but they have all these things that they're still entitled to? So the provisioning process is, I'm going to create a user object for that person. And then I need to enable them to authenticate to the systems that are in scope. Authenticate is traditionally login password. I just need to prove I'm Jerod. This is how you know I'm Jerod. I know the password. That's my secret. Authorization, I think I like Soup Nazi from Seinfeld, like no soup for you. Authorization is, okay, I'm logged in. What can I see? If Jerod is a regular user, I shouldn't have access to the social security numbers for every employee in the company. Did a pen test where with a regular user account, we found the social security numbers for every employee in the company. That's an example of an authorization failure. Self-service, which is my favorite thing as a pen tester to go after. I need to cut cost on how long the help desk is spending on password resets. I want to make things easy for the user, so I'm going to publish web services or web applications that will automatically let the user request something, and then we don't have to bother anybody with the details. If I can abuse a self-service portal, I can create my own accounts. I can grant myself my own entitlements, and then use that information to get further and further in an organization. Password management usually goes hand in hand with that self-service piece. And then compliance in a more mature organization is, okay, we've done all these things. Are we following the rules that we set in policy? Are we following the external regulations? And then at the end of that life cycle, because it'll come back up here when they need accounts to new systems and need new entitlements, but ultimately there's an expectation that the relationship is going to end. And again, for the people in higher ed, you have my sympathy. I've worked in that environment. I know how difficult it is to manage accounts when you have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of alumni who technically the relationship never ends. I was talking to somebody at a conference earlier this week who is in the healthcare space, and he's in the process of trying to clean up identities and has a large number of identities that don't belong to anybody, but that he is not authorized to remove just in case they need them. That is, swear to God, the excuse he got from leadership to leave the environment exposed. But understanding this user lifecycle gives the pen tester the opportunity to say, okay, each of these is a weak point, or there are going to be unique tools or techniques that I can use to compromise this environment. Another thing that is helpful for pen testers to know is that who does what. In a larger enterprise, you're going to divvy up the security work. So when it comes to managing identity and managing access, it's not just going to be one team. The help desk is going to be the team that does all the access issues. I can't log in. I can't get to this folder. Somebody's going to pick up the phone and call them. Somebody's going to send an email. Somebody's going to log in a ServiceNow and open a ticket. When it comes to watching that user behavior and looking at log data, that's not the help desk. That's going to be your security operations center, your analyst. And when it comes to actually managing the environment, analysts, architects, engineers, your security team is the group that's going to own and run IAM. The importance here, the takeaway, These people have different levels of experience. They have different motivators and goals in the organization. They have different levels of expertise. Just without picking on them, if you're going to go after one of these three groups as an attacker, which group are you going to pick? Help desk. Why are you going to pick the help desk? Helpful? Yeah, I mean, the help desk is incentivized on how helpful they are. That is the opposite of what the security team is incentivized on. Security folks are incentivized on making sure bad stuff doesn't happen. If somebody calls and says, look, I'm in a hurry, just give me a new password. Security team is going to say, no. Help desk is going to be like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble. Your new password is ABC123. And because of that different experience, because of the different motivators, as the defenders, as the blue team folks in the room, you need to understand that certain areas might need a little more attention, that certain teams might need a little more TLC when it comes to preparing them to defend against these types of attacks. The worst part, I've done a lot of work in the SMB space. Small and medium business, this all might be one person, which is a whole different challenge. Now it's not a matter of expertise, it's a matter of being spread entirely too thin. You can't have one person be the help desk, the reviewing and responding to events and logs from the Security Information Event Management System, and doing all the identity and access management stuff. They're not possibly going to be able to do that to any degree of excellence. They're always going to be held to kind of a flattened out standard. So let me jump into the attacker flow, and here's where this is my takeaway for the talk. If you're a red teamer, add all of this stuff to either your internal pen test, or carve out an exercise at your organization that you just go slide by slide, hit all these things, and then start to get a feel for what your organization looks like from an attacker's perspective. When it comes to open source intelligence gathering, when I'm doing OSINT gathering, I divvy it up into two general categories. The one category that we're most familiar with is systems. Between Shodan and Census, I'm going to get all of your external facing IP addresses and listening ports. So I'm going to know what I can connect to. I'm going to know what I can talk to. Findsubdomains.com, I've only started using that recently, and I love it. Because it shows you all those, like dev1.company.com, the non-production site that they still have on the internet. It's going to show me all the login portals for the admin interfaces that you've exposed that maybe shouldn't be available from the outside. Hurricane Electric's BGP Toolkit is a good complement, and I also have just started using the SPF records lookup on mxtoolbox.com, SPF Sender Policy Framework. These are the email addresses, or not email addresses, it's an email security control that says these are the email domains that I trust, right? I now am a ServiceNow customer, and I'm going to send emails and they're going to have ServiceNow in the email header. I don't want that caught in my spam. I want to make sure all that data gets, or all those messages gets where they're going. So if you go through those 5 tools for your organization, you're going to know everything an attacker knows about you from the outside without ever scanning your external systems. The beauty of OSINT, it doesn't trigger alerts. And that's passive, semi-passive. It depends on, get into the nuances. But you want to gather information about the systems and then spend time getting to know what your people look like from the outside. LinkedIn is a gold mine. I use LinkedIn all the time. That's how when I write articles, I publish them to LinkedIn. When I find a cool story, I share it to LinkedIn. Like coming here, I told people, I'm going to be at ConVerge on Friday talking. Come check it out. But if you want to go to LinkedIn and find out who works at a company, who used to work at a company, how long somebody has worked at a company, what different positions a person has worked with at a company, the specific technologies that the IT admins are using on a day-to-day basis in their jobs, it's all in their LinkedIn profile. I spent a lot of time out there. Hunter.io is, I think it's like a sales and marketing tool. It's an email lookup tool. If you're trying to find somebody's email address, or if you're trying to find multiple email addresses for an organization, hunter.io is Johnny on the spot. At the very least, what you're going to get from hunter.io is the structure of the email address. Is it first initial, last name, first name dot last? So that's a great one. I go to Pastebin to find out the organizations that have already been compromised. I was on a pen test for, I'm from Ohio, a company out west, and I found an email address and it was a password hash, like an MD5 hash, no salt, that had been dumped from some other, like I have no idea where the password came from. But I had a username and a hash password. I go to an MD5 reverse lookup site, and it reversed to what appeared to be the name of the woman's son. So I had a username and a password that I knew had a high likelihood of working on other websites. Now the password was 6 characters, all lower, all alpha. There's no password complexity in a corporate setting that's going to support that. But if they're using software as a service tools, right? If she's logging into websites outside of that company to do her job, that's the first password I can try. If those sites are in scope, I'm going to get in. So Pastebin's a good place to find compromised creds. Inteltechniques.com. Does anybody use this site? I'll just warn you. I'm glad that you guys use it. Carve out a couple of days before you go out there. It is, in my opinion, the most comprehensive collection of OSINT resources curated on the internet. The guy who built it out has a lot of tools that he's baked into the site that you can just plug in information, click go, and he'll do all the lookups for you. ReconNG, Tim Tomes, super slick, great for pulling back information. But Discover from Lee Baird is like one of those shoulders of giants tools. So Lee builds on top of Recon. And with Discover, it's a Python script. You plug in some API keys, you give it a target organization and a domain name, and you run it. And the amount of open source intelligence you get back in a matter of seconds is mind-boggling. Use these tools against your organization. That's going to give you an understanding of what usernames, user ID, user information is publicly available. And then when somebody gets that info, what are the websites and web services that they're going to try to log into? Document metadata. And I'm going to have to race through this. I have so much I want to share with you, and time-wise, it's going to be tough. You create a Word doc. You create a PDF. There's what the user can see, and then there's what an attacker can see. Metadata is very sexy. If you're a Linux fan, metagoofle is a command line utility that's going to pull that metadata out. I like FOCA, Fingerprinting Organizations Collective Archives. It's the weirdest acronym. But with FOCA, you pull down the file, you extract the metadata, you analyze the metadata, and you're going to get usernames. It says passwords. I've never had any luck with passwords. I do get IP addresses for internal systems like print servers. I do get internal system names from time to time. Run FOCA against your company's main website. Now this is where you're going to cross the line from semi-passive into active intelligence gathering. It's not traditional behavior for somebody to download every file from a company's website. But if your company has any files that are available for download without authentication, you should look at them and see what kind of information is in there, especially in the metadata. So either one of those tools is going to give you information about the identities, and it's the analysis that's going to put some context around that. So again, what are we looking for when we do this? You want to understand the technology stack. If you grab data from Shodan and Census, Hurricane Electric Toolkit, find subdomains, you're going to have a pretty good picture of what tech they're using. Are they a Microsoft shop? Do they have a lot of that Apache Linux? What are some of the security technologies, right? SPF might give you their proof point customer, right? There's so much that you can get about the tech stack from that data. Once you understand the technology they have in play, pull down the admin guides. It is the best place to find default usernames and passwords. And yeah, 2018, we should be changing default administrative credentials on internet-facing services, right? We should. It doesn't always happen. And even in large organizations where they know to do that and they're following system hardening processes, if you just miss one, then, right, you deploy another thing and I overlooked a step and now I've got a set of credentials, administrative credentials that somebody can use to access stuff from the outside. New user and new hire how-to guides are a winner because number one, if you've got VPN, somebody's going to have written in detail, this is how you log into VPN as an end user. As an attacker, you want VPN. So if they tell you how to do it, see if you can grab it. You can also get an idea for the default password for new hires. If the first password is X, right, they're going to put that in there. The first time you log in, your password will be X, and you're going to be prompted to change it. Go to LinkedIn. Who's somebody who has, well, if they've just started at the company, you might not be able to catch them. But I'll get into how you can use that data in a minute. You're going to look for the user naming convention, like I mentioned in the email. Once you understand what a username looks like, that's half your credential set, right? If they don't have two-factor, password's one half, username's one half, and that's very important when it comes to password spraying. And then you're going to look for login portals. Specifically, I want to know webmail, I want to know SSL VPN, and if they have password self-service, give me that one. Password spraying for folks who have not been exposed to it. Instead of a traditional brute force attack where I have one username and I try every password, I don't do that because I know I'm going to get locked out after 3, after 5. I'm not going to be able to test all the passwords I need to test. But if I know every username and I can throw every username at an application and try the same password over and over, I'm only failing to log in one time. That's not going to lock any account out. That's not going to shut my attack surface down. Sorry for any, because I realize I know where I am, right? I live in Columbus, Ohio. These are the passwords that I'm going to use. If you're here in the state up north, you're going to have different passwords you use. But go for sports teams, professional. Go for college sports teams. Go for variations of the company. Like 123 is common. The year they were founded was common. Put together your password list and then use a tool like NTLM Botherer. Throw it against like webmail. In this case, this example, it's against online.link.com for what? Is that an Office 365 shop? I think that's how that works. But you take all the users that show up in like that Discover tool I mentioned is going to have like one page of the output is all usernames. So you just copy paste that becomes your users.txt file. You build a custom password file, and you've got to be real cautious. There's a flag in NTLM Botherer that you can pace yourself, that you don't throw too much data at the web app at once. But all I've got to do is get in once. And if you don't have that option, if you want to go against some of the external facing web applications, burp, using Intruder or Cluster Bomb. There are a couple of technology or tutorials out on Portswigger's website to show you how to do. It's still a brute force attack with one password and multiple usernames. You just kind of flip it, and then once you're in, if you can get into like the webmail site, then just go through the user's mailbox with a tool like Mail Sniper, and you're going to get all kinds of good info, valid info that an attacker would want. Once you're in, if you can actually find a set of creds, traditional creds, and come in from the outside, and this is assuming maybe number one, remote. I'm coming in over SSL VPN and it's not protected with two-factor authentication. If I've got username and password, once I'm in, then I'm going to get on a box on the inside and try some of these. Heck, I still see organizations that have RDP exposed directly to the internet. Then I don't need to worry about the whole VPN piece. I'm just going to log straight in like I'm an admin on the internal network. Once you're in, whether it's remote or whether you're actually physically on site, bring your attacking laptop in, plug it in, start poking around at their internal network. You're going after creds, or I say tickets, forged tickets. So Mimikatz, obviously very popular. Kerber roasting, getting the whole like golden ticket, silver ticket, magic ticket stuff. You either get a set of credentials that you can use by pulling information from memory. You create Kerberos tickets so you can just pass along and say, don't worry about the username and password. Just let me do what I'm trying to do. And when it comes to using tools in that space, I like, there were a couple of guys this morning talking about the use of PowerShell in an organization. PowerShell is rapidly becoming a pen tester's best friend. And I'm not going to get in the religious war of Linux versus Windows and what flavor do you test on, not touching that. I can say as a pen tester, I traditionally pen test from a Windows box running Kali in a VM, because when I want to run FOCA, when I want to run any PowerShell tools, if I'm on my Windows box, I start there. But whatever your approach is, understanding PowerShell and taking a look at PowerShell Empire, these three tools are all going to give you the ability to go from a traditional end user to the next user, to the higher level privileges. And then there's part of PowerSploit, which is a PowerShell post-exploitation framework. PowerUp will look for processes that are currently running, that are running under higher level of privileges. I think I've got this right. And then you hijack that process and try to create accounts and try to get it to do things using that process's privileges, even though you're a regular user. Another pretty nice PowerShell tool. But once you're in, however you do it, the goal is to go from being a regular user to an administrative user. Social engineering is still wildly popular. And I want to point out the date on this tweet for folks who can't see it. June 4th, 2016. So this tweet will be celebrating its 2-year birthday in just about a month. This was a social engineering attack that this person had observed against people who were using two-factor on their Google accounts. So in this case, it was 6-digit code that you receive, and I tweeted it out before this talk because I want to go read it later. Kevin Mitnick was talking about a two-factor attack against LinkedIn's two-factor authentication. Some of you have seen this already, right? Where it's called LinkedIn.com, and it's a phishing webpage, like you could build it in set, but you get somebody to go to a second site, and then when they get the text, they give you the two-factor code, and then you just pass that two-factor code on your side. So social engineering is, in my opinion, it's the big nemesis to two-factor authentication. But just asking somebody, can I have your password? Here's a chocolate bar. Don't underestimate that. Or, does anybody recognize this guy? President of the United States went to him for medical services at some point. What I want to point out is this is his Facebook profile pic. This is still his Facebook profile pic. I don't know what's on that sticky note on the monitor. I've tried to look. I think the pixelation is bad enough that even if it is his password, or was his password, nobody can see it. But when it comes to social engineering, if you can get on site, right, be polite, show up to deliver something to somebody, be from the landlord company doing an inspection, just walk around and look for sticky notes. Go into every conference room and look on the whiteboards. You will find multiple passwords that will give you a valid credential set. Phone calls, which I hate doing. I did one. I felt terrible about it. I'm like, hi, we're so-and-so. We've been hired by your company to integrate with this other, and it was a charity that they worked with, which made me feel like a total bastard. And I said, you've been selected as one of the people to get set up first. And so your boss gave me your phone and your name. If you could just give me your username and password, I'll go ahead and plug it in the system, and then you'll be able to use it. I hate social engineering. It's not how I'm wired. But just calling to ask somebody, or calling the help desk and trying to get somebody's password reset, especially if you can be one of those VIPs, there are ways to abuse social engineering to do that. And then password reset notification for software as a service apps. Use the Social Engineers Toolkit site cloner to stand up a fake version of a website, and then start contacting people like with that SMS about the password reset. Get them to land on that page. And if you've ever used SET, when you set up a cloned website and somebody logs into it, it just writes the creds plain text to a file on your attack server. So social engineering becomes a really valuable tool still for getting credentials. Password self-service is one of my favorites because I don't like talking to people when I'm pen testing. I'm one of the hoodie, whiskey, headphones, leave me alone. I'm very comfortable with that. But with password self-service, the questions that we're still asked, I'm not going to ask you what your porn star name is, but there are stupid little quizzes that will ask questions like this that get people to give up names of their family members, names of people they're associated with, places they've lived, places they've gone to school. Whether you're doing that through social engineering or whether you're just combing these two websites, and this will be another takeaway, separate from the testing, look yourself up on these two websites. I freaked my wife the hell out when I was on, what was it, Family Tree Now? I was prepping for something, and I decided to look for it. Now, I've known my wife for 30-some years at this point. I mean, almost our entire lives. And there were people that were showing up as associated with her that I had never heard of. And so I'd ask, I'd be like, hey, do you know so-and-so? And I'm sitting on my laptop on one end of the couch. And she thinks for me, she goes, yeah, how do you know so-and-so? And I'm like, never mind. Did you ever live here? She's like, what are you doing right now? These websites take that publicly available information and collate it, and then they try to sell you reports. But you can still look up for free and find a ridiculous information about every place you've lived, all these people in your family. And then if you have that information, and then fun quizzes on social media, you can go out to a password reset portal, and if it's not been configured in a way to expect this attack, you can just keep refreshing over and over and over. I did a pen test once that I was trying to get into a portal, and I had a couple of people. I would go to the portal, get 2 secret questions. I would hit back, and then I would go into the portal again and get the next 2 questions, and I would do it over and over until I had that person's complete set of questions. And then I would go do my OSINT on the personal side. And I got in with somebody actually because he had his own vanity website. One of the questions was, what was your favorite toy as a child? That's a tough one. I don't even know. Stretch Armstrong? I mean, that was kind of fun. But I don't even know how I'd answer that. I go out to this guy's vanity site. He's a guy in IT, and every icon is a little Lego head. So I already had the other question, what year did you graduate from high school? I found that on My Life. So with the other question, I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. LEGOS. Says, what do you want your new password to be? And I'm like, here we go. And so I queued up all the websites I was going to log into, because this is disruptive, right? When you do this attack, you're not logging in and being sneaky. At this point, you're changing somebody's password. Everything that they use is going to break. So if they're not on vacation, or if it's not a weekend, you're going to get shut down pretty quickly. But you can get in with a password reset portal, or with a self-service portal. I actually had a pen test I did where it was a consumer-facing website, and they had Drupal on the back end. And they had built a custom Drupal module to let people register for the website. I went through this Drupal module, and I was able to enumerate that they started numbering users in a certain way, and I could see information for other users by pulling up the number instead of the identifier. It's all just like Burp or like Paros proxy, tamper data, tools like that. But then I started going back and back and back, and I'm like, I wonder what user 1 has privileges to do. Because think about it, like an application developer, what's the very first account you're going to create in any application? It's the admin account. And in Drupal, I couldn't get into the admin account because the technology itself kept me from doing that. So I just went user 2, user 3, to find all the developers who still had admin rights but weren't the actual admin, and was able to get in and take over the whole application. So if you can self-register on any of the websites that are in scope for your test, then you turn on your web app pen testing chops and look for ways to abuse that application functionality to either escalate the privileges with the application or with the account you've compromised, or to create other accounts or gain access to other areas of the application. Has anybody used Responder? Yes. If you are a pen tester, put this in your toolkit. It's like, what is it? Cougar Piss works 90% of the time, 70% of the time, or I don't know, Ron Burgundy. But with Responder, a short version, you fire it up and then you just wait. And as activity comes across the network, it's going to see your device and think it's other devices on the network are going to think they're supposed to tell you things that they're really not supposed to tell you. And so what you get from Responder are creds, unless network admins have things set up to shut that attack down, which we don't see all the time. Any one of these tools that I've just talked through, any one of these resources, is going to get you at least one set of credentials. And as an attacker, if you have that one set of credentials, then it's regular access, privileged account. Just keep moving laterally to different systems and keep escalating privileges until you get to domain admin. So how do we stop it? How do we get ahead of it? This, in my opinion, is the most important part of any talk that anybody does when we're talking about the bad stuff. What's the good stuff? How do we change it? Where you begin is up to you. Every organization in this room has grown organically. You can't just go in and say, okay, we're going to start doing security for the first time ever today, and we're going to build Ivory Tower perfect first time out. First thing that you should do is analyze your attack surface. So all those OSINT gathering tools, go through them, especially, can't emphasize this enough, Discover. If that's the only tool you use, Discover, which, again, you have to register a lot of APIs that tie into Recon NG in the back end. You can drop Discover on Kali. I don't know if they're building it into each release yet, but it works right away. Do the OSINT gathering, and because you work for your organization, do some scanning. Do some port scans, do some vulnerability scans. You want to understand what technology stack you have that's facing the outside world. What can other people see about your technology footprint? And ideally, I hope you're running some kind of vulnerability scan. In my consulting days, I love Nessus. I'm not going to lie. Qualys is solid, but their support, for anybody who's watching, could use a little help now that you've IPO'd. Rapid7's Nexpose, and OpenVAS, which is the open source Nessus port from back in the day. Any one of those four tools is going to give you a really good picture of what your attack surface looks like. Run the scans from inside the network, run them authenticated. Give your scanners the ability to authenticate with administrative or root level privileges so you can get all that information back. So analyze your attack surface first. You have to know what you look like to the bad actors. And then reduce your attack surface. If you have internet-facing systems that don't need to be online, take them offline. If Nessus or Nmap is coming back with a lot of ports open that don't need to be open, shut those ports, right? This is, I know it's common sense and you've been hearing it for as long as you've been in the industry. But once you understand what your attack surface looks like, start asking yourself, what can people log into? Do I have an administrative tool that's exposed to the internet that the admins don't really need to do that remotely? They should actually be doing that from the internal network. Start to shut that stuff down, close open network ports, go through that metadata process, look at what metadata is in your files, and if you have to have your marketing department recreate any of those files, do that. If you look at the files that are internet facing, the attackers are going to go after those identities if they get usernames out of metadata. People whose usernames are ending up in the files that are internet facing may or may not have privileges to publish data to your website. An attacker doesn't always want to compromise stuff on the inside. Sometimes they just want to put a website selling drugs, right, like Viagra. I was doing a risk assessment once, and we found that somebody who wanted to do business with our organization was selling Viagra on their website. That's not what we hired them for, what we're going to them for. They didn't even know they were selling Viagra on their website. Somebody had compromised their website and added that one page, and that's it. So go through that metadata, shut down, because you don't want those IDs to be taken advantage of. Disable inactive accounts. I don't care if somebody says, yeah, but we might use it someday. Okay, but until then, it's going to have zero access. I'm not going to let people log into it. Remove unnecessary privileges. Do you go through a process of seeing who has access to what? It's tough. It's important to go through and say, hey, Jerod has worked here for 10 years. he can get to way too many things. One of my biggest fights at Abercrombie was who has access to the data center. And that was one of many. That doesn't even touch the who has access to files on our network. So I know firsthand what it's like to try to take access away from people. Not easy, but necessary when it comes to protecting your people. Implement multi-factor. How many people multi-factor their email? Like personal email. Like nobody at work is telling you have to do this and you do it anyway. See, that's what I like about these crowds. I have multi-factor on GitHub. I have it on my Gmail. I have it on LinkedIn. I have it on Twitter. If a website that I use supports multi-factor, I turn it on. If I care about the website, yeah, I won't go into why you should care about the websites. But you should have multi-factor at this point on VPN. If you have on-prem apps, and I say on-prem, like if you have a local app that's payroll processing, right, that gives people the ability to say where their direct deposit's going to end up, it's time to put multi-factor on that. We've seen attacks where people get in and send direct deposits to other bank accounts. Software as a service apps. I used to work for the Ohio State University, and one of the expectations that we had for any software as a service application that hosted restricted data, so our highest level of data classification, the most sensitive data, didn't care that we didn't own or control or manage it within the university. It had to have multi-factor, or it wasn't a viable option for the university. That's a tough call. That's not a call that you're going to be able to make on your own. You have to have leadership support to do that. Fortunately, we did, but multi-factor is going to help shut some of this down. And then security awareness training should say, don't use corporate email for personal sites. Don't overshare on social media. I was at a conference a few years ago, and they had somebody from Brown University did the lunchtime keynote, and he shared that during freshman orientation, I think it was Brown, when these kids would be coming in, right, ready to start their career, they're out of high school, they're not living at home anymore, they're ready to go do their thing. What they would do is they would do a slideshow of the most compromising pictures that they had been able to find on these kids' social media accounts. And they would blur out the faces, right? But you're going to recognize the setting, you're going to recognize the outfits. So the majority of the people in the room had no idea who these kids were on screen, but the kids knew. And the reason they do this is say, look, be smart online because we found this. And for them it was, what if we were an employer, right? What if we're somebody who's interested in spending some intimate time with you? Do you want these pictures to be the first thing they see? So teach your people about protecting their social media accounts, and teach people how to detect and respond to social engineering attacks. To know that they're being phished is one thing. To reply back and say, haha, I'm not falling for it, that is a terrible idea. Do not engage. And it's the IT folks who need to be told this. The end users are usually pretty cool about it. But I've had IT folks play around with, it was a USB drop, and they thought they'd play a prank on us, and they ended up giving us all the information about their internal network. I'm talking, I had everything as if I was local admin on every box on this, it was 2 subnets. And they did it because they thought it would be funny for us to get overwhelmed with data. And yeah, it was. I mean, I appreciate a good prank, but they did not understand how to respond to that type of attack. All right, I'm going to race through these last ones because we're at the end of the time here. Tighten up admin privileges. Users should have strong passwords. Admins should have crazy strong passwords. If you can start to multi-factor your admin accounts internally for local like server access, there's precedent for that. If you could just get away from the same username and password on every, like admin credential set on every endpoint, you're already shutting down a lot of the attacks that somebody's going to launch once again on the inside. Microsoft's local administrator password solution, free. You can download that and start using that right now. It's going to be a process change, but you don't need budget, and it's not overly complex. But you want to start getting your head around how do we control admin credentials, or how do I even know whether or not somebody is abusing admin credential? You have to understand what normal looks like, and then just start putting some controls in place around, tell me when something abnormal happens. I don't need all the noise. I don't need all the craziness. I just need to know, what does normal look like? And then what am I most interested in? One of the things that's going to be a sure giveaway, not only for attackers, but for people circumventing change control process, watch for changes to administrative groups. Look for the creation, thank you, of new administrative accounts. If that is the only alert you have, the only alert that you have coming to people and saying, hey, this just happened, do something, then it's kind of late in the process, but it will help you shut down the attacker then, instead of 6 months, 9 months, year and a half down the line after they pillaged all the IP and sensitive information. Is anybody familiar with Lenny Zeltser? Excellent. So he has on his Zeltser.com website for years had a series of cheat sheets. One of the best ones to check out, how to suck at information security. It's a winner. But he's got one cheat sheet in particular, this one, the incident log review checklist. I've got some screenshots over the next 4 slides from that cheat sheet. If this is the only stuff you put in your alert system, whatever technology you're using to send emails to say, hey, tell me when these things are happening, he gives you guidance on web server alerts, network device alerts, Linux system, and Windows, like domain controller level alerts. There's another resource I refer to in the resources section called Ultimate Windows Security, Randy Smith. He goes into a crazy amount of detail about different Windows event logs and log IDs and what they mean. Use resources like this, and don't try to figure out everything, right? Don't eat the entire elephant. Just start one bite at a time. Just put a few of these alerts into your alerting system, and then watch and see what happens. Because the stuff that you see in here is likely to be indicative of a bad actor. Also, if you get all this other stuff, again, defenders, spend your time on that prevention, detection, response stuff. If you get to a point that you can put honeypots, honey tokens, honey creds in your environment, that is only going to make it easier for you to detect actual attackers. So an example of honey creds is, I've got an account called administrator. The account's disabled. Or I might call it like PeopleSoft admin, right? Whatever. I put admin in the account name, but I don't give it the ability to log in anywhere. Nobody should even know about that account, let alone ever try to log into it. All you have to alert on are failed logins for that account. You could even put a spreadsheet out on the company all drive that says PeopleSoft admin password, right? A little text file. Bury it so somebody thinks they had to work hard to find it. But if you have something on your network that doesn't work, but you can alert on very quickly and simply, I can tell you as a pen tester, when we find these accounts and we think, oh my God, this is too good to be true. Is it? There's always that moment of doubt. And depending on how mature the organization is that we're testing, we're going to try to log into that account somewhere. And if you've got that alert set up, if you've got the honey creds and the alerts set up, you're going to catch us and shut us down right there. So the one takeaway here, with fake like domain admin, Windows admin accounts, it's more than just a name administrator. It's SID 500, right? I'm not looking for an account that's named administrator. I'm looking for an account that's got that particular SID. So I'll let you dig into that on your own. It's just, misdirection is a beautiful thing. And a couple of tools that you can look into for creating your fake creds and fake tokens. I've included them here. So wrapping it up, fundamentals, they're everything. I've got a separate project I'm not going to get into with you today called the Common Sense Framework that is part of my consulting career. I take all the things that I've been recommending over and over and over to people and boiled it down to what are the most common recommendations that have the greatest impact. And specifically when I'm talking red team, blue team in that identity space, prevention, system, network, and application hardening. Start shutting off things you don't need, start changing credentials for admin accounts. For detection, logging and monitoring using some of the resources I mentioned earlier, and response training for not only end users, but also for the people responsible for implementing and managing these technologies. Not everybody who has security in their title understands incident response and forensics. Take time to send them to a class, give them a chance to learn, so that you can start doing that. End of the day, resources. I've got a slide share that I published years ago, Identity and Access Management 101. It goes into that primer stuff in a little more detail. I've got a talk that Adrian actually recorded a couple of years ago at a summit in Columbus, what you need to know about OSINT if you want to see a little more OSINT gathering. If you're a Pluralsight student, I've got a course on Pluralsight, 5 hours on OSINT gathering for corporate targets. There was a free month if you didn't grab it. Somebody had like 1 month of Pluralsight free. That is plenty of time to take that class if you want to check it out. And then that Intel Techniques site, the guy, Michael, can't recall his last name. Sorry? Frazzle, thank you. He built a Linux virtual machine that is entirely dedicated to open source intelligence gathering. It's called Buscador. I've used it. It's pretty slick. I like it. He's continually updating it. I've got resources here that call back to some of the things I mentioned earlier. And these are all the ways you can get a hold of me, including the speaker deck and SlideShare links. That's where you can download all the slides. I know we're end of the day, and I appreciate you sticking it out. We are after 6 o'clock. Thank you. If you have questions or want to come up and talk, I'll hang out for a bit. But I appreciate the time, and I hope you find the information useful.